Welcome back to chapter 3. Before we start playing around inside of the animation blueprint editor, let's talk about how a basic character animation flow works inside of the Anim graph. It looks like this, and I'm sure many of you can recognize this if you've taken like a beginner's first-person shooter course. Anyways, it does work very much like other things in Unreal Engine. So we have a start point here, right? And these blue rectangles, they represent different kinds of animations that can be played. You know, it can be just straight up animations that's linked to the animation files that we have imported, or they can be blend spaces, which at the end is still an animation being played at the final output. But they're basically just a group of different animations that can be morphed in between each other using like a bias value. And so that's what the blue rectangles are. And what's next, of course, is the connections between these things. So I'm going to use a green here. And so for start, there is a connection which has a direction. That's why they have an arrow to them. And they can travel like this, and they can also go backwards as well. So the direction is important. And these connections have a Boolean value, a condition that will allow a certain animation to transition from one to the other. And that's going to be like a Boolean value. So they have a Boolean here. And some of them you can just say auto, just do it anyway. And so those will just go regardless of what the condition is. Others you can specify, right? And usually you have like a speed value or other Boolean values that you can set if like a certain action is requested. And each of these connections, okay, this is important, have events that can be triggered. And that's going to be when the transition begins and when the transition ends. So these we will be using because, let's say, for example, this could be like some kind of pickup animation, right? And let's say we press something or the character arrives at some point, the pickup animation transition is finished. We can, for example, like have an object and attach that to the hands, which is a terrible hand, but whatever. And then if the pickup animation finishes and it enters back into Anim 2 or whatever, right, it can like hide it, for example, and then do, add 1 point or something. And this, of course, is going to be in the blueprint class that houses the animation blueprint. So yeah, something like this. And this is how we can connect blueprints with the animation blueprints. So once you have understood this now, let's move on to actually creating the animation blueprints. To get started with the animation blueprint editor, let's first work on the Stickman. So let's go into the folder, right-click, animation blueprint, based on the Stickman skeleton, create. Let's call it AB Stickman 1, enter. Okay, so to control the flow of the different animations that we have, we need to create a state machine. So state machine, and I'm going to call it like AI movement. There you go. And let's click on that. And inside of here is exactly what I talked about. So it seems like it's called entry, not start. Made a mistake there in the diagram. But anyways, if you go to the asset browser, all of your animations that we've imported should be here. And I know for a fact that for landing and air squat, I'm going to use them as is. But for these happy idle and happy walk, I'm going to use a blend space. But anyways, let's just do initial connections. So we just want to enter with landing. And after that, we allow it to transition to idle. And then based on the speed of the movement of the character, we will blend to walk. And then we can also trigger in the actual blueprint class, not the animation blueprint, the blueprint class that owns the animation blueprint. We can like trigger it to drop an item. And after that's done, it will like go back into walking. So before we can complete this, we need to create the blend space. So let's go do that next. So compile and save. Okay, so to create the blend space, let's go back into the content browser here. And I'm going to be using the legacy 1D blend space. So that should be inside of animation. And I'm thinking that there is a new thing here, blend space, but there is a legacy blend space 1D, which we can use for the Stickman. Call it blend space BS idle walk 1. Now I'm interested to see what the normal blend space looks like, so I'm just gonna see what that looks like. So let's do BS idle walk 2. Let me just enter and see what it looks like. So I think, yeah, we can probably just use this one. So there's 2 axes, which we don't need. Okay, so I'm sure the legacy one is going to be like unsupported in the future. So let's try using this new blend space or the updated version. So we need 2 things, the idle. So drag it into here and walk. So I'm thinking we don't need this other axis. So I'm just going to use down here. And let's just say it's like 35 and 0. And so the vertical or horizontal axis is going to be the velocity. Yep. Okay, I understand it now. I think it's basically if you have like other turning animations, you can definitely use the other axis so that you don't have like a turning point, which looks really bad, but we're not going to be worrying about that. So the horizontal axis is velocity, which is cool. So if I use like shift, I think here, or control, it will start walking. Yep, and then back here. And so this should work. Yep. And I think this is all good. And I'm happy with the rate scales, so that should be okay now. So let's save this, and this will become available inside of the state machine. So BS idle walk 2. All right, and then inside of here, let's connect. We go down here to squat and then back to idle. All right, so it looks like this. And I'm sure inside of here, there is, okay, it's called none. And I think maybe it's because of the variable name. Yep, so I need the horizontal axis. So let's call this one, call it velocity, because keep it consistent. So save that, and I'm sure it's gonna, yeah, there you go. It's gonna update. And in here, I'm just going to promote to variable, movement speed. All right, so this is the variable that's inside of the animation blueprint. And this will dictate the blending position, so just like the control thing. Yep. And that's fine. Let's go back into a movement. And this one, I want it to do automatic transition, which you can apply it here, which just means that it doesn't really have to care about any kind of state. After the landing finishes, it's just going to go automatically to the BS idle walk. So that's basically it. So the network looks good. So compile and save. Okay, why is that not? Oh, it's probably these 2. So I'm going to just create a can squat because it's a squat animation. I'm going to put a question mark. So can squat, if it's allowed, it will enter. And then once it's done, I'm just going to allow it automatically. So for the return, let's turn on this one. Let's compile and save. That's good. We're not using this legacy version anymore, so let's delete this. And we can talk about how these variables work inside of the state machine or the animation blueprint. Okay, so the variables inside of this anim graph, these are connected to this event graph tab, which is the animation blueprints, which looks exactly like the blueprint editor. And these can be modified and also can be read inside of here. So of course we need to get the speed, right? How do we do that? So we need to set this. So the try get pawn owner, that's trying to get the blueprint class that houses the animation blueprints. And then we want to get its owner's speed, which we can do by getting its velocity. And that gives us like a directional vector as well as the length. And so I only want the length information. So let's get the length, which will give us a float value, and that can be connected here. And let's connect this. So that's all good. Let's compile and save. So now we can get the speed value from the actual blueprint class. And that will be used, of course, for this one here. And so for can squat, it's better to set that inside of the actual blueprint class, this owner here, rather than here, because that's not the part of the logic inside of here. All right, so love to say that, finally we can test this, but unfortunately we don't have this owner that I'm talking about, the blueprint class that's going to be owning this animation blueprint. So we need to go and create that. Actually, we're not actually going to create it. We're going to import it from the third-person template, which is mostly set up for us. And so to do that, if you plan on doing more character stuff in UE5 in the future, I recommend you to follow this step. So let's make a untouched, clean third-person template project file, which you won't modify, but you will migrate from that project into another project to further work on it on the other project, if that makes sense. So of course I need to open up the launcher, and I'm going to launch 5.6. I'm going to just minimize that. Okay, so it seems like it opened in the background, so I'm just going to click on that. And games, once again, and third person. So it looks like it's very new. It's different from 5.5, but anyways, should be okay. I'm happy with the project location. Let's call this one like third person temp 1. And okay, so these, yeah, this should be okay. So let's just create that. Okay, seems like it's open, but it's actually behind this project. So I'm going to just minimize that. So this is all good. I want to once again disable real time. And we have this characters here, mannequins. Where is that? Maybe it's in here. Yeah, third person blueprints. It's this one here. So I want to bring this into our current project. Yep, that's fine. And so right click to migrate, asset actions, migrate. And what I'm going to do is I don't need any of this stuff except for just that. Where is that? The blueprint, which is going to be here. So click on that, only that one, click OK. And I'm going to go back in here, and it's going to be this one for me, content, and let's just select folder. And so that should be it. So I'm just going to close the third person template, bring up the previous project, and it should be here. There you go. And so obviously it's going to have a lot of errors, which we're going to deal with next. So, okay, in chapter 4, what we'll do is to finally repurpose the blueprint class from the third person template and begin simple programming for the AI movement. Now, this movement is not about controlling a character in a video game sense, and the real purpose of this course is to give you more diversity in the elements you can use within an installation. So not just particle blobs or physics mesh blobs, but also characters, right? And so you can combine particles and characters, or physics meshes and characters as interactable elements so that you set yourself apart from the majority. So if you want to keep learning, click on the next video.